Chris, was that too loud? Members, welcome to the Standing Committee of Transport, Infrastructure and Communities. Today we will be continuing our study of the aircraft certification process. That was hard to say. The certification process. And it's a pleasure to have the Honourable Marc Garneau, the Minister of Transport, with us. Minister Garneau, welcome. And we'll start off with you in your presentation.
Monsieur le Président, Messieurs.
Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, Vice Chairs, members of the committee, thank you for the invitation to contribute to the committee's study of aircraft certification. Transport Canada appreciates the committee's work on all issues related to the safety of the travelling public and is pleased to help in any way it can. Aircraft certification is essential to the safety and security of our transportation system and is part of Transport Canada's mandate. March 10th marked the one-year anniversary of the tragic Ethiopian Airlines accident, and it's been nearly 18 months since the tragic Lion Air accident. Our thoughts continue to be with the victims along with their family members and friends. As committee members know, the model of plane involved in both accidents was the Boeing 737 MAX 8. On March 13, 2019, days after the Ethiopian Airlines accident, Transport Canada received and analyzed new satellite data that informed its decision to swiftly close Canadian airspace to the aircraft.
Remain in place until Transport Canada is fully satisfied that all safety concerns have been addressed by Boeing and the FAA and adequate flight crew procedures and training are in place. Civil aviation relies on the global collaboration of manufacturers, operators, and regulators. All stakeholders, including governments, work together to minimize the risk of aviation accidents. The International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, facilitates this collaboration. Under the ICAO Convention, the country that manufactures an aircraft, known as the State of Design, is responsible for certifying its airworthiness and safe operation. The State of Design must conduct the testing needed to certify the aircraft and then share this information widely. Under Annex 8 of the ICAO Convention, countries can either accept the State of Design certification or use the results of the original performance tests to validate the certification. Boeing manufactures the MAX 8 in the United States, and the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, is responsible for its certification. La FAA est aussi responsable.
The FAA is also responsible for certifying Boeing's approach to fixing the problems identified in the wake of the MAX 8 accidents. In addition, it must ensure the effectiveness of any recommended changes to the aircraft's design and operation, as well as to crew procedures and training. Transport Canada continues to work closely with the FAA on its review of the MAX 8. We also continue to work closely with civil aviation authorities in Europe and Brazil in hopes that this model of aircraft can return to service and transport travelers safely to destinations around the world. Transport Canada has been, since the accidents, conducting an independent review of the design changes proposed for the MAX 8 that the FAA are working to certify. This review will include test flights of the aircraft to validate the proposed changes. Any changes in an aircraft's design or operations can also impact crew procedures and training. A joint operational evaluation board comprising international civil aviation authorities, including Transport Canada, is analyzing the proposed changes to the MAX 8 and will identify any potential impacts on crew procedures and training.
For instance, identify new training requirements such as additional simulator training before the MAX 8 can return to service. Transport Canada may also require additional training for crews that operate the MAX 8 in Canada. A key contributor to the Lion Air accident and a suspected contributor to the Ethiopian Air accident is the automatic activation of a system known as MCAS, Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, following a failure of an angle of attack indicator, which measures the aircraft's angle relative to the oncoming air. MCAS is part of the larger system that also controls speed stability of the aircraft. Under specific flight conditions, MCAS automatically moves the aircraft's horizontal stabilizer, the device that adjusts the nose of the plane so that it points up or down. In the wake of the Lion Air accident, the FAA, the state of design responsible for the MAX 8, issued an emergency airworthiness directive related to the MCAS. The directive amended procedures by drawing the crew's attention to the existing runaway stabilizer procedure that would allow crews to effectively counteract the unwanted activation of the MCAS system. 3 Canadian operators fly the MAX 8: Air Canada, Sunwing, and WestJet. Transport Canada immediately shared the FAA's airworthiness directive with these airlines and then took an additional step to further improve safety. In collaboration with the 3 airlines, Transport Canada developed and implemented enhanced training requirements for pilots. The requirements exceeded the standards implemented by the FAA's airworthiness directive and were specifically designed to reduce the time delay to the crew's use of the runaway trim stabilizer procedure required to counteract the effects of an unwanted MCAS activation. Les nouvelles mesures en matière de formation.
The additional step of new training demonstrates Canada's commitment to the highest possible safety standards. To complete the training, air crews had to memorize the 5 steps required to exercise the runway trim stabilizer procedure. Previously, air crews had to memorize only 2 of the 5 steps and then, if needed, consult the cockpit handbook for the other steps. I'm confident that the measures implemented by the FAA Airworthiness Directive, subsequently adopted and enhanced by Transport Canada in collaboration with Canadian MAX 8 operators, significantly reduced the risks involved in situations like the one that led to the Lion Air crash. Canadian pilots are better prepared thanks to these mitigation strategies.
Operates in a highly complex, continuously evolving environment. I encourage committee members to recognize that Canada maintains one of the safest civil aviation systems in the world. Our safety record results from the hard work, dedication, experience, and technical expertise of the men and women directly involved in the system. On behalf of the public, Transport Canada remains absolutely committed to safety and bases all of its safety-related decisions on accurate, current, and relevant evidence. Thank you. I'll now do my best to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garneau. Mr. Doherty.
Thank you, Minister, for being here. Thank you to your guests. On October 29th, 2018, Lion Air Flight 610, a Boeing 737 MAX, crashed into the Java Sea 13 minutes after takeoff, killing all 189 people on board. Less than 5 months later, on March 10th, 2019, Ethiopian Flight 302, another Boeing 737 MAX, crashed just 6 minutes after takeoff. 157 people perished, including 18 Canadians. We're here today in search of answers for the families of the victims of these crashes. We're here in search of answers for Canadians as to how the 737 MAX aircraft received certification by you, Minister. Transport Canada has a world-leading technical professionals who are experts in their field. You are absolutely right with that statement. They're hardworking, they're smart, dedicated people who did their jobs at all steps of the 737 MAX certification process. They asked questions. They brought forth their concerns. They did their job. Based on the internal information that we have obtained from a concerned citizen, Minister, you didn't do yours. Despite serious safety concerns raised repeatedly at every step of this process by Transport Canada's technical experts, starting from the test flight, then again just prior to certification. Concerns were raised time and again in the certification report, yet you still certified this aircraft. Canadians deserve to know, and most importantly, the families of the victims who died in this crash deserve to know why. Minister, at any time prior to or during the certification of the 737 MAX 8, were you aware of Transport Canada's concerns with this aircraft, yes or no?
The process of certification is a complex process.
I understand that, Minister, and you know that I'm going to ask you to be very succinct. Yes or no, were you made aware of any concerns during the certification process?
I would like to be able to answer the question. It requires more than a yes or a no.
Yes, sir. Go ahead and answer the question.
Thank you. So the certification process, as you know, is a complex undertaking, and one that I'm very proud that Transport Canada is very proficient at. In fact, we certify Canadian aircraft, which are accepted.
Minister, I need you to answer my question, which was a very direct question. At any time during the 737 MAX 8 certification, were you made aware of your technical experts' concern regarding the 737 MAX aircraft? Mr. Chair, this is my time.
I will answer by saying that I was comfortable with the work that was being done by Transport Canada to certify this aircraft.
Minister, in our opinion, this is not an acceptable answer, and I'm sure that this is not much comfort to the families of the victims. You're the Minister of Transportation in this country. This is your department. The buck stops with you. For the record, it is your testimony today that were you made aware of the concerns expressed by the test pilot with the stall identification as well as the automatic flight control at the time of the test flight?
I will say again that I have a very capable
Minister, were you made aware of this?
organization that undertakes the certification of aircraft. I am aware that a letter of concern was sent to both Boeing and the FAA.
Minister, at that
as
time,
part of the validation process.
You're aware
that
of
we
you're aware of the
undertook,
concern letter. Were you aware of the contents of the concern letter?
Yes, I was.
Minister, why did you then still allow this aircraft to be certified?
Concern letters are letters that are written when the regulator, in this case Transport Canada, which is validating the certification of an aircraft which has been certified by another country, wishes to have clarification or does not agree with part of the certification
despite repeated
procedure.
attempts by your
And
department.
in this particular
Doherty,
case,
Mr.
we
Chair.
expressed
Mr. Doherty,
our concern.
Minister,
This is called
with all
a
due respect,
letter of concern.
I understand that.
And we sent to Boeing
Minister,
and said
at
there were some
every step,
questions that we needed to have
FAA
answered,
and in turn Boeing
that
did
is
not
part of
answer
the
your
normal
questions.
process when we do a
answer the
validation
question.
of an aircraft that is certified by another country. And we indicated that we required answers to the particular questions that we raised, which had to do with the identification of stall.
Minister?
And we
Thank you.
continue to persist with that.
Who overruled the concerns of the TC experts and approved the certification of the 737 MAX?
Certification of the MAX 8 by Canada was done by Transport Canada.
Minister, immediately after the first crash, Lion Air Flight 610, Transport Canada technical experts once again raised their concerns, yet you failed to ground the aircraft. Why?
So on that, we looked at the evidence that was beginning to come out at that time, and at that time the FAA came out with what they call an airworthiness directive, which they felt would address the possibility of this happening again while they were
At any time, did you
proceeding
share
with
your
a fix
concerns?
to the
At any time,
MCAS.
did you
Mr.
share your
Doherty, thank you.
concerns
And that
with
airworthiness-
WestJet, Air
Thank
Canada,
you,
and
Mr. Doherty.
Sunwing?
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Minister. And
Thank you.
I guess as you can appreciate, and all of us around this table appreciate, this is a very difficult study that we've been undertaking here, and you know, we've sent out condolences to the people impacted by these tragedies. So the first question I have for you is, why did Canada not ground the MAX 8 flight after the Lion Air crash, and did any other aviation authority do so?
So when a tragic accident like this occurs, the first thing we want to know is what happened. And we go to the state of design, which is the United States and the FAA. And what they came forward with was what's called an airworthiness directive, which provides, in this particular case, a crew procedure should the same situation occur while they are at this same time working on a fix for what is known as the MCAS system. We looked at the airworthiness directive that was provided by the United States, and as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we went to Air Canada, WestJet, and Sunwing and spoke to their test pilots and said, this is what is being proposed. And amongst ourselves, we said, this is not sufficient, because this is a procedure that must be done in a timely fashion. Instead of only memorizing the first two and the actual emergency quick reference checklist is a card that's beside the pilot. We felt that it was important to memorize 5 steps. And so we did our training differently from every other country in the world with respect to it, because we felt the airworthiness directive was insufficient. And Air Canada, WestJet, and Sunwing were very comfortable with it. And that is what we put in place in case a similar situation occurred before a fix was found for the MCAS. No other country, by the way, to answer the second part of your question, grounded the MAX 8 after the Lion Air crash.
Follow up, sorry. So I guess in summary, what were some of the factors that you and your officials had to consider before taking the decision to ground the fleet?
So when the tragic accident of Ethiopian Flight 302 occurred, we immediately tried to understand what had happened there. And I would caution people not to use hindsight here, because at the time, on the 10th of March, when this occurred, everybody was trying to understand what happened. Could it have been a mechanical or electrical problem? Could it have been a pilot error? Could it have been a terrorist act? Nobody knew what had happened on this particular occasion. And because we knew that there were Canadians on board, and we knew that there were MAX 8s that flew in Canada, we were trying to understand what had happened. And so we were scrambling for information, and we were speaking to our international partners. We were getting the information, some of it anecdotal, from ground observers. We were trying to find out what had happened in terms of communications from the control tower and air traffic control. And so we were trying to understand what had happened with this particular, because we had no clear picture of what had happened. We now know what happened, but at the time we did not. Until we obtained data called ADS-B data, which is GPS data that is transmitted from the aircraft up to a satellite and back down to the ground. And the company that provided this is called Arion. And when we looked at that And we were wondering whether there might have been a similarity to the Lion Air crash. When we compared the 3D profile of the plane flying, we said this looks very similar to it. And it is at that point that we decided to ground the aircraft because we had evidence. And to my knowledge to today, we are the only country that ever explained why we grounded this airplane.
So, you said in your speech that restrictions will remain in place until Transport Canada is fully satisfied. So if the Boeing 737 MAX were to return to service after all this, what steps could Transport Canada take to reassure the public about the aircraft's safety?
Well, that is primary as a priority for us. Is we know that we want to make sure that Canadians who are going to fly in this airplane in the future are completely comfortable with the idea, with the knowledge that we have addressed the problem. The problem has four aspects to it that we have to address. One is hardware changes, software changes, the procedures that pilots must be trained to, and the training that they must undergo. And only then, and I have also said in the past that we Canadian test pilots will fly this airplane as part of us validating the certification. But only when we are 100% satisfied that this has truly been fixed will we allow this airplane to fly over Canadian airspace.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Mr. Rogers. Mr. Barcelou-Deville.
Monsieur le ministre, en fait.
Thank you, Minister. The day after the second accident of the Boeing 737 MAX 8, when 18 Canadians had perished, you stated in the media that you would not hesitate to get on board this airplane, even though it was being grounded everywhere across the world. 2 days later, you announced that the airplane would have to be kept on the ground. Do you think your statements were irresponsible? No, because when the decision has not been made to ground the airplane, it's difficult to say. You know, we don't recommend you flying this airplane, but we're not going to ground it. We didn't know yet what had caused the accident at that point. That's why we had not yet made a decision whether or not to ground the airplane. As I said earlier, we didn't know whether it was an electrical problem, a pilot error, a terrorist attack. Yes, but there are other countries that said that it was that the flight had to be grounded. Yes. Well, I have other questions that I would like to ask. It was based on scientific information. There were Boeing employees working on that aircraft stated that it was clowns supervised by monkeys who had created this airplane and that they would never put their families on this aircraft. And there are also American Congress associations that stated that this aircraft was dangerous and full of defects. Canada was one of the last two countries to ground the aircraft. Why did you wait so long? And we in Canada, because Quebec for now is still part of this country, why do we still need the permission of Americans to ground an aircraft? No, actually, it's the opposite. It's Canada that decided to ground the aircraft. We communicated with the FAA, and they followed up with us hours later. They're not the ones who grounded the aircraft first. We did it first. We told them that we thought there were some very similar points between the two accidents, and therefore we had decided to ground the aircraft. The Americans followed 2 hours later. Yes, I understand. That's your version of facts. No, that is not a version of facts. Those are actual facts. Let's be clear on that. Those are facts. Canada made the decision, and the United States did the same 2 hours later. We had communicated with them. We told them that we had decided to ground the aircraft. Don't tell me that is my version of the facts. I understand, but please go ahead. But factually, the Americans 2 hours later decided to ground the aircraft. I mean, 2-3 hours. I don't know the exact timing, but that doesn't mean that it was on that same day. So the timing is, the timing is quite close. I think it's too late. I don't know what you're insinuating right now, but I believe it lacks respect. It's disrespectful. We made a decision. The U.S. made a their own decision a few hours later. It's not right to try to create the impression that there was some kind of agreement between the two. That's not what I was saying. I was just asking questions. When you stated that you were ready to get on board the aircraft, the American government had information that convinced you to ground the 737 aircraft. Once again, that is false. What you're saying is false. That's what we saw in the media. Unfortunately, the media are not always correct in interpreting the facts. That's why I'm quite pleased to be here, because there are a lot of things that were said in the media that are false, that are partially false, or where there are significant omissions. So I want to remind everybody that it's important to stick to the facts. Fine. But according to the media, but you'll fix what needs to be fixed after my question. The information was critical. It stated that the aircraft was grounded the day you received the information. The U.S. said it was 2 days later, and according to your office, I believe this is true, at least 2 or 3 times a day, you were in contact with the American authorities. The question I wanted to ask was, don't you think the FAA lacked transparency by not sharing that information with you? I cannot speak for the FAA. And as to your question regarding the information they had, we were communicating, we were in contact, our 2 organizations were, and on both sides we were trying to figure out why this accident had occurred. I have one last question. I have 30 seconds left. So Mr. Turnbull and other officials have stated that they fully trust the FAA. That's what they said last week when they appeared February 25th. They said, yes, they had faith and trust in the FAA. The Americans appear not to have given us all the information they had, but they also allowed their own companies to certify themselves. Since 2005, with the new FAA procedures, it's Boeing that certifies its own aircraft. They pick their own engineers who ran the tests on the Boeing 737 MAX 8, and the FAA simply rubber stamped the results. Do you think there's been a mistake in trusting the FAA? I believe that the report that was issued recently by the Congress committee states what it has to state regarding the FAA and Boeing. I'll let the document speak for itself. But what I can tell you is that we certify the aircraft ourselves. We carefully select those who work with the companies and who will be helping us with the certification. When we certify the C series of Bombardier's aircraft, even if Transport Canada spent 160,000 hours of its own employees doing certification, there were also other delegates who were helping us. But it's not Bombardier who selected those people. It was us. I don't want to talk about their certification process.
Being here. The Congressional House Committee on Transport, which has been holding hearings, as you know, released their preliminary report a few days ago, and they describe how the financial pressure on Boeing to compete with Airbus led to decisions and assumptions that, quote, jeopardized the safety of the flying public. The company was prioritizing its finances over the safety of the flying public. They also found that, quote, there was a culture of concealment that saw Boeing withhold crucial information from the FAA, including, quote, hiding the very existence of MCAS from 737 MAX pilots. On the current regulatory process, the report states that, quote, the FAA's current oversight structure with respect to Boeing creates inherent conflicts of interest that have jeopardized the safety of the flying public. Given these revelations and how they relate not just to the certification of the 737 MAX, but a more general failure of self-regulation at Boeing and the prioritization of financial interests over safety, can Canadians still trust FAA-certified aircraft?
So there's no question we've read these reports as well that have come out, and they speak for themselves. But I can tell you that one of the things that we undertook after the tragic Ethiopian aircraft downing was that we would review our validation process to see if we can make them better. And we have participated since that time in many committees with other regulators, including the FAA, EASA, which is the European regulator, and ANAC, which is the Brazilian, and participating in a group called the Joint Authorities Technical Review Panel, so that we can examine the whole question of how certification needs to be done properly. If we cast our minds back to decades in the past, Canada has had lots of Boeing aircraft going back to the 707 and future ones that came after that, and Airbuses. And in the past, this process has worked very well, this certification.
Can I ask
But
the
now,
next question, Minister?
Now, after the MAX 8, we are reviewing the situation.
Right. So after the first crash of Lion Air on November 19th, Transport Canada signed a validation improvement roadmap with the FAA. The stated goal of this roadmap was to, quote, take progressive steps to reduce, if not eliminate, in-depth technical involvement, unquote, by a validating authority such as Transport Canada, where Transport Canada would undertake, quote, no further technical review or additional issuance of validation approvals on an FAA-certified aircraft. Do you agree with this agreement with the FAA?
I will ask David Turnbull, who is my chief responsible for certification, to answer the question.
Thank you for the question. Personally, no, I don't. In fact, the mandate of that activity is in the process of being rewritten. It so happens that that particular mandate was written at a particular point in time. Well, I was not present at that meeting.
It was signed by Transport Canada after the first crash occurred.
It was signed, but I'm telling you here and now that the wording of that was planned to be altered prior to these accidents, I might add.
But it wasn't altered.
Not
we
yet.
signed
Not
we
yet.
signed a version with that wording, correct?
It's still in the process of being revised. That we meet annually with the FAA. It's on the agenda for our next meeting.
Minister, can you commit to providing the committee with internal departmental documents indicating your department's assessment and the reservations of your officials regarding Transport Canada's reliance on the FAA's assessment in approving the 71 design changes to the Boeing 737 MAX?
We can commit to providing any documentation that Transport Canada generates with respect to validating certifications.
Those ones specifically?
Sure.
Okay. Regarding the 71 design changes to the 737 MAX, had you yourself been informed of those changes?
Not about the specific 71, but I take full responsibility for the certification of the MAX 8 by Canada, or the validation of the certification.
Okay. At a press conference on March 13th, 2019, this was the press conference at which you announced the grounding of the 737 MAX, you stated that you are, quote, very, very comfortable with the fact that the FAA is the certifying agency, unquote. Mm-hmm. Given what has come to light in the United States, do you stand by those comments?
I have watched and very closely what has happened in the past year. And I think that the FAA itself is recognizing that there are certain changes that need to be made with respect to its certification process. And it will be up to them to do that, and we will watch what they do in terms of certification.
But do you stand by those comments that you made?
I made comments on the 13th based at that time on it. That is what I believed, yes.
Minister, the General Director of Transport Canada Civil Aviation, Nicholas Robinson, said in May 2019, following the Ethiopian Airlines disaster, that he had full confidence in the FAA. Do you agree with this assessment?
We have to make our decisions about questions like that at the time that we are asked those questions. And at the time,
But you had concerns from Transport Canada officials. There had been an accident.
There had been yes, but let me again explain what a concern letter is. It's not necessarily saying we're not going to accept this aircraft. We're saying there are some things we need to better understand and some things that we don't agree with. And that's an ongoing process. It happens as part of the normal certification, and it can happen the other way around when we certify an aircraft and another country may have some questions that it's going to ask. It's a very complex process. It's a very technical process.
Some of the problems seem pretty simple.
Well, everything
Thank you.
is simple in hindsight. I'll say that.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Mr. Bachrach. Move on to Mr. Doherty.
Minister, a number of times in your testimony, you've said it's easy or hindsight. You referred to hindsight being 20/20. But Minister, the information that we have received shows us that you had clear view from day one, from November 9th of 2016, when the test pilot wrote concerns. From May of 2017, 1 month before the certification, where they raised the concerns once again. From 4 weeks after the first crash, that the concerns were raised once again by your technical experts. It was raised in the concern paper that you're referring to. And at all steps of the way, you had an opportunity. One country, Minister, you said you take full responsibility. It took one person to say, wait a second, we're not getting the answers to the questions that we had. Your technical experts did their job. Minister, my question to you is this. At any time during the process, prior to the certification of the 737 MAX, did Boeing communicate or FAA communicate to you a tight timeline that they had for delivery of the 737 MAX to Canadian operators, and that they would like to they'd like to see the certification made in June of 2017?
No, they didn't communicate with me directly. No.
So you're not, Minister. I'm going to refer back to, and your director is actually jogging your memory. You referred to the concern paper that you're well aware of. Page 2. Please note that in order to meet its delivery commitments to the Canadian operators, Boeing has requested Transport Canada to issue the 737-8 MAX ATC in June of 2017. To avoid delivery delays to our operators, Transport Canada will review and discuss FAA position on this concern paper during its upcoming 737-9 validation activities. Therefore, this concern paper, as you rightly noted, will remain open when the 737-8 MAX ATC is issued by Transport Canada. Despite the serious concerns regarding the issues on the Minister, your department still certified this aircraft. Now that Mr. Turnbull has jogged your memory, do you remember now that Boeing and FAA told you about the timelines?
So I'm aware of the concern letter, and I'm also aware, as you pointed out, that we had decided that we would still accept it as an ongoing open file. But I'll pass it to.
I have one more
David
question
Turnbull.
to you on this.
If we can, but I mean, you.
Yeah, no, this is part. Mr. Turnbull can answer this as well.
But you
Mr.
are
Mr.
making-
Garneau, I just want to know, Minister Garneau, I want to know at any time during this process, did you or Mr. Turnbull communicate your concerns to WestJet, Air Canada, or Sunwing?
No, we did not. Perhaps it would help if I re-explain that which Minister Garneau has already explained with respect to the process of the concern paper. First off, this concern paper that you refer to did not specifically raise a technical or safety issue. It did not. It asked a question. The methodology by which Boeing demonstrates basic stall compliance, Part 25, Paragraph 201, was in question. We did not understand fully the methodology that Boeing had used. There were a number of systems involved with respect to stalls, MCAS being one of them, which is part of the STS system, EFS system. There's other aspects of the design. And we were trying to ascertain and understand the role these systems play in affecting the stall compliance. There was not a specific identification of a concern. When the FAA responded to us...
I disagree, Mr. Turnbull.
Well, I'm the one who signs off on those respectively, Mr. Doherty.
That's good to know, Mr. Turnbull.
And I can tell you where we're coming from.
Mr. Turnbull, I've actually had technical advisors read through this, 737 MAX pilots themselves, and they were absolutely shocked to read what we read. That you or the minister has accepted responsibility, certified this aircraft. And I will bring you back to edition 2, where you once again disagreed with both of the positions of the FAA. Your technical experts disagreed with, you're absolutely right, the stall identification criteria that they're using and how it pertains to CFR.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty.
25201.
Yeah. I'll give you a short answer,
Mr. Doherty, you've just made a claim that you have a source, a pilot, that has told you that they are, horrified, if that's the term that you used, by this concern paper. I would ask you to, first of all, provide the name of that person and in writing their assessment of it, because I think in fairness, I'd like to hear what your source is.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Thank you, Minister. Mr. Sidhu.
I'd like to start off by offering my condolences to the families affected or impacted by this tragedy. Thank you, Minister Garneau, Mr. Turnbull, and Mr. McCrory for being here today. Minister, I'm just trying to understand the difference between Transport Canada and FAA. Can you provide some specific details where Transport Canada took different steps than the FAA in dealing with the MAX 8 situation?
Yes, and I think very few people don't know about this, but Canada has played an extremely important role since in the last year in addressing the problem with the MCAS system and working with other regulators to come up with a solution to it. And if I may be permitted to read this, because it's quite a long list. We have played a leading role internationally in ensuring a safe return to service of the Boeing MAX 8. In April of 2019, that was a month after the Ethiopian crash, Canada set the stage by identifying to the Federal Aviation Authority key areas of concern that must be addressed before the aircraft can return to service in Canada. These key areas include acceptable levels of pilot workload, an extremely important factor, the architecture of the flight controls, and thirdly, minimum training required for crew members. I myself, in April of last year, publicly said that simulator training was required. Boeing has since committed to also, in addition, Canada had been advocating since the beginning that simulator training would be required before pilots can fly the aircraft again. Boeing has now agreed the simulator training is required. Boeing has since committed to full stall simulator training to familiarize crews with the angle of attack failure that occurred in both the Ethiopian and Indonesian accidents. Canada also discovered that natural stall characteristics testing had not been performed on the MAX with the speed trim system, the FS system, and the MCAS system inactive. In other words, when those systems are inactive, the plane can still stall, but there had not been testing of those characteristics when those two systems were turned off. And that's something that we brought to the attention. We convinced the FAA that stall testing was required to validate safe flight handling characteristics with the MCAS system off. Canada also proposed a procedural change to reduce excessive cockpit distraction and workload condition by allowing the crew to disable the stick shaker warning within the cockpit, another important contribution. So the leadership that we have demonstrated with my team in working with the FAA and also with the Europeans and the Brazilians, I think is clearly indicated here in terms of how we are actively working to fix this problem, and Canada's input is being taken very seriously.
Thank you for the answer. I've got a two-part question here. What role, if any, are Transport Canada officials playing in the FAA evaluation of a possible return to service of the MAX 8? And how much of that information is being shared with us? Are we just simply following their work, or is there a back and forth between?
Three big important committees, or have been, the CMT, which is Certification Management Team. One is called the JOEB, which is the Joint Operational Evaluation Board. And the third one is the JATR, JATR, which is Joint Authorities Technical Review. So we're deep into these committees that are evaluating. So it's not just an American exercise with us watching from the side. We, the Europeans and the Brazilians, are intimately involved in the whole process, and we will do our own validation of the final fix when it comes, including Canadian pilots flying the modified MAX 8 to ensure that we are satisfied, and we will make sure that if we feel that there are certain procedures that have to be trained to and that simulator time is required, we will make that compulsory for Canada.
So my last question is Transport Canada considering changing its validation system for the approval of internationally manufactured aircraft? And how often does Transport Canada accept a state of design certification coming from other countries versus how often do we conduct our own test to validate the certificate?
So in the past, we have done validation of aircraft certified by the United States or the Europeans, and we have validated their certification. There's no question after the MAX 8 tragedies and the recognition that there were some problems there that we're reevaluating how we do validation of certification so that we are putting a more critical look at it and subjecting that certification process to a much higher scrutiny.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Mr. Sadu. Mr. Doherty.
I want to remind those who are here today and those who are tuning in why we are here, and it is for the families of the victims. Amin Ishmael, Noor Mohammed, Don Tanner, Ruby Pauls, Darcy Belanger, Stephanie Lacroix, Angela Rayhorn, Kosha, Prera, Ashka, and Anushka Dixit, Micah Messent, Pius Adesanya, Amina Ibrahim Adawa, Safia Faisal Iga, Derek Luigi, Danielle Moore, Peter DeMarsh, Jessica Haiba. Minister, I don't believe that this meeting has brought any relief or solace to the families, victims. If anything, I think it's raised even more questions, or perhaps it's validated the questions that they've had. It took over almost a year for you to meet with these families. As a matter of fact, in the last Parliament, when this motion to study this was raised, the Liberal majority shut it down. We are here today for them. We're here for the families that have listened every day to this testimony. I appreciate that you've taken full responsibility to this. The concerns that we have and the concerns that have been raised by the FAA or by the congressional hearing clearly point to the fact that this aircraft should not be recertified, and the FAA should seriously undergo some, and Boeing as well, should be held accountable for this. Minister, will you be looking internally on this process? And what is your message, given the information that we shared today, to the families that are listening in?
So I met with the families, and I apologized to them personally for not meeting with them earlier. The culture at Transport Canada, an organization that I'm extremely proud of, that is very, very competent, is one of dealing with technical issues And we should have been more sensitive to the fact that there were humans also involved here. And I apologized to the families. And we learned some lessons there because, as you probably noticed, when Flight 752 was tragically shot down in Iran, we were much quicker to react. So I apologized for that. Our culture was to try to find the source of the problem. And the fact that I did not, or other government officials, meet with them right after is something that I accept in terms of responsibility.
Minister, I'm going to ask
could
you,
I finish, please?
Minister,
I spent 3.5 hours with them, and I tried to answer their questions. And I cannot imagine the pain that they felt from those losses. I was there with them for 3.5 hours,
and
I am deeply. And may I finish, please?
emotion as well.
May I? Yes, of course. The pain, the loss, the suffering, it is impossible for me to imagine it, how much they suffered. And
Minister,
deeply apologized for that.
Minister, then you will understand.
Now, let me finish.
No, Minister,
you have said
Minister,
that this
you will
airplane, based on
you will understand my
this,
disappointment.
you will need to know.
You will understand my disappointment.
You have
Minister,
said
that when I read the
Mr. Doherty,
documents,
let him
and
May
finish
I
the rest of your
finish,
question.
please?
Mr. Chair, it's my time.
No, it's not your time.
No, it
This is the
isn't your
committee.
time. It's
Hold on,
my
Minister,
time to
Minister,
answer you.
Minister, you
if I may, Mr.
understand.
Doherty, if I may.
Mr.
It's my,
Chair.
it's my time right now.
Minister,
As the chair of this committee, I want you to understand that this is not your time.
It is my
This
time.
is the committee's time.
It is my
You're
time.
just getting 10 minutes of it. And show some respect. If you're going to ask a
I am
question,
showing respect,
you're going
and
to have
if-
respect enough to get the answer.
if you will-
Minister, this is your time now.
Thank you.
Answer the question. Thank you.
And you are not showing respect. But you said in one of your comments that this airplane, all the experts agreed, should not be
No,
recertified.
that's not what I said.
You
You're
do
technical.
not,
You're
with all
technical
due
experts.
respect, with all due respect, Mr. Doherty, you do not understand the complexity of this situation. That's something that is very, very
do
clear.
you understand the complexity of it?
Yes, I do,
Oh,
actually.
oh, you do? Okay.
Yes.
So,
And so
Minister,
your statement
Minister,
about this
then you will
airplane should not
understand
be
my frustration.
recertified is, I don't know where you get that information, but you clearly do not understand the process of certification and the technical challenges that are involved with it and the complexities that are involved with it.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty.
Well,
Mr. Biddle.
So much, Mr. Chair. Minister, do you think there should be systemic and formal changes to the international system of accreditation as a result of the MAX 8 tragedies? And if so, what changes are you looking for?
I think that we have all learned in the last year some very important lessons. And believe me, we have just within our department spent 8,000 hours as part of the process of understanding what happened and at the same time finding a fix to it. So as with all organizations, if you do not use the opportunity when something like this happens to improve your organization, then you are failing. And I can tell you that at Transport Canada, we're very aware of the fact that we have to look at ways to improve our validation process and perhaps, if I can put it in more colloquial terms, be a little more skeptical in the future as we approach these. It has served us very well in the past, and Canada's record of air safety is really quite outstanding, but this is an opportunity for us to improve.
Thank you. More generally speaking, how do you respond to the criticisms that Transport Canada has been a victim of regulatory capture and that too much oversight has been delegated to the industry itself?
So in our case, when we do, if we're talking about the MAX 8, I think the examples that I gave to your colleague, Mr. Sidhu, indicate that we're very proactively contributing to this and to the fix that is happening. I think if I give the example also after the Lion Air incident occurred, where we said the airworthiness directive that had been provided by the FAA was not sufficiently complete for us, and we modified it, should be indications that we do think independently with an eye on safety. And we went and worked with the 3 airlines, and they agreed and trained to that. And of course, we never had any problems with that. But we make our own decisions at Transport Canada, so we're not captive of anybody else or any regulations.
What is the aviation safety record in Canada? Can you provide statistics, and are there any trends that can be observed?
22. Okay. It's a good record. In 2018, and we're talking about all aviation here. There's small airplanes, general aviation, as well as big airplanes. 2018, there were a total of 151 aviation accidents, down from 2017, where there were 190. So that's a 29% decrease from the previous 10-year average of 214. There were 16 fatal accidents in 2018, which is down from the previous 10-year average of 24. In 2018, the fatal accident accounted for 25 fatalities, also down from a total of 27, and below the 10-year average of 44 fatalities. So the accident rate continues to go down. Most of those accidents, I hasten to add, are in small aircraft, in general aviation. The accident rate for large commercial aircraft is one of the best in the world.
Perhaps, Minister, I can afford you some time, and I promise not to interrupt. I don't know if you want to respond to Mr. Doherty. I hope this, going forward, I'm new to this committee, and we don't see this on a continuing basis, but would you or Mr. Turnbull like to respond to some of the allegations that have been raised by Mr. Doherty?
Well, unfortunately, Mr. Doherty has not quoted his sources, and I think that in fairness, am allowed to ask why he makes certain statements without providing the sources. So he is guilty, like some of the media, unfortunately, of not doing their homework properly, and in some cases putting out stuff that is not backed up by actual facts. I don't know if Mr. Turnbull would like to add to that.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that,
Point of order. Sorry, Mr. Turnbull. Point of order. I thought it would be without interruption, Minister and Mr. Chair, but Mr. Doherty, again, is trying to talk over all of us when he doesn't like what's being said, and that's inappropriate.
And without having an opportunity to...
Thank you so much. Mr. Turnbull, I apologize for interrupting.
I think we need to understand that the regulations and the standards that we use to certify aircraft there are very many of them. They're very complex, and in many cases, they're very subjective. It is very common for a validating authority to come along and ask a question. We dig into an issue, we get an answer, we don't quite understand it. We are not necessarily at that point finding fault or discovering something that was wrong. Our aim is to seek an understanding, and in some cases, when we do not understand, we reveal a difference of interpretation, perhaps to one of the existing rules or the advisory material that supports those rules. We have to make a decision. I make a decision each and every time on every aircraft we approve, whether that disagreement on interpretation constitutes a safety concern or whether it is simply a different approach to the same problem. Now, what do we do if it's that? We take it outside the project. And we say, we don't want to keep arguing about the interpretation of this problem in the future when we validate the next aircraft. So in other fora, we will come together, we will send our collective technical experts to various meetings to try to harmonize the approach and agree on a common approach so that we don't effectively trip over these things again. That is how we migrate to a harmonized position.
Thank you. Mr. Barcelou-Deville.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, actually, even if Boeing had hidden its aviation manual of the MCAS system, and that even if it had falsely stated that no additional training was required for the system, your officials knew that this new MCAS system existed, and they still decided not to test it during the certification and trusted the FAA. And on February 25th, when I asked them if it was a mistake to not test it, they said, no, it was not a mistake not to test this new MCAS system. Since 2018, Transport Canada has put in place a new certification system. It's an automatic one with the US, Europe, and Brazil. And despite all of the problems that we've seen with the FAA that we've just talked about, your officials stated that they did not intend to review how they did things and that they intended to keep going with this process. I have a few questions. Do you agree with your officials, that if there's no, it was not a mistake to not test the MCAS system? Secondly, before going forward with the common certification system, will Transport Canada ask that the ODA put an end to the ODA system that doesn't ensure quality after the certification process? Well, I'd say two things. First of all, not all of the information was provided to us on MCAS. That's something that we found out later. And that's important information. It makes us realize that we'll have to be quite careful and pay attention to these things during future certification processes. I also believe that the FAA, with its relationship with Boeing, is reviewing that relationship. And that's something we did within the Certification Management Committee. We're reviewing how the certification duties were delegated to certain people, where Boeing chose who to delegate that work to, and it led to some of the emails you've mentioned, and it's quite shocking to hear about that. If I have time, no.
Mr. Beckrek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Briefly, Minister, you spoke earlier about your understanding of the complexity of the certification process. And I can assume that has been an understanding you've had for some time as the minister and with your previous experience. Is that fair to say?
Yes, airplanes are very complicated.
I'm thinking more about the system, the certification system itself.
Yes.
And can I assume that includes the role of the FAA in Canada's validation process and certification system?
So the way it works is we certify Canadian planes, and because other countries believe in the quality of our certification, they accept, in the case of the United States and Europe, to validate our certification.
Yeah, I'm familiar, and we validate theirs.
And
but
we
my
do
question,
that.
I only have a couple of minutes.
So
I
I'm
really
not
want
sure
to
what
get to
your
the
question
question.
is.
So one of the things that stood out for me in the congressional report was the role of authorized representatives. These are employees of Boeing whose paychecks are signed by the Boeing company, who the FAA asks to do their work for them.
Yes.
To ensure the safety of the aircraft.
Yes. And
did you know about these authorized representatives and their role when you made the comments on March 13th, when you said that you were very, very comfortable with the fact that the FAA was the certifying agency?
Yeah. So, yes, we're aware of that.
Were you when you made those comments? Like, does that to me? And I don't have the detailed understanding, but it seems astonishing that we would put employees of a company in that position where they're forced to choose between two masters, one of which signs their paychecks.
So the process of certification is a massive process, and although, as I gave the example of the C-Series, we at Transport Canada spent 160,000 hours of Transport Canada employee time doing certification. We also have delegates, the people that you called authorized. We use the term delegate, and we choose them in Canada. That's how we proceed, because we want to make sure that the people who are doing the certification and reporting to us are people that we have vetted.
And are they employees of the company?
They're employees of the company.
Of the aircraft manufacturers?
Yes, because otherwise to do a certification on an airplane, it requires really a massive undertaking.
So, given what's in the congressional report, is that something that is being reconsidered?
We check on them as they're doing we don't just sort of say.
So it
"Give us
talks
the
about
report."
conflicted representation and this conflict of interest that occurs when you have an employee of an aircraft manufacturer doing the work of the regulatory body. Is that something that you're considering changing going forward?
We believe that the process that we have where we choose the people who are delegates to help with the certification, that we are confident that they have the expertise, and we monitor them as they do that.
Thank you,
Throughout
Mr.
the
Bachrach, and
process.
thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That will exhaust this session. Between 3:30 and 4:30, the Minister Garneau, the Minister of Transport, will now be getting into our second session with Air Canada, Sunwing Airlines, and WestJet Airlines. With that, I will suspend for 5 minutes. If I can reconvene. Is this the new list?
Nope.
It'll be myself and Mr. Davidson.
Okay. We'll start the second part of today's meeting. We'd like to welcome Mr. Murray Strom from Air Canada, Vice President, Flight Operations, as well as from Sunwing Airlines, Captain John Hudson, the Acting Director for Flight Operations, and from WestJet Airlines, Mr. Scott Wilson, Vice President, once again, from Flight Operations. Gentlemen, welcome. Glad you can make the time to come out to the committee and give us your testimony. I'm not sure who's going to start. Who picked the short straw? Okay, Mr. Strom. Mr. Strom?
Do you want me to start? Sure.
Go ahead, Murray.
Okay.
Okay, you're up.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair, members of the committee. My name is Murray Strom. I'm the Vice President of Flight Operations at Air Canada and the Designated Operations Manager responsible for Air Canada's Air Operator Certificate to Transport Canada. I've been a pilot with Air Canada for 33 years and I'm currently a Boeing 777 captain. For most of my 33 years, I've been involved in the training certification of Air Canada pilots and have held various positions such as Chief Pilot on the Airbus A320, 787, 777. I was also responsible for the initial program to bring the MAX 737 aircraft to Air Canada. Before I begin speaking to the certification process, on behalf of Air Canada and our 36,000 employees, I'd like to express my condolences to the family and friends of the victims of these two tragic accidents that ultimately led to the grounding of the 737 MAX aircraft. As someone who has spent his entire career promoting safety in aviation, events like this remind me and the entire Air Canada family of the importance of my job and our motto, safety first, always. My expertise is in training, inspection, and operation of aircraft at Air Canada. It is not in the certification of the aircraft. That is a function of Transport Canada and other authorities such as the Federal Aviation Administration in the United States. I have, however, been involved and worked closely with the certification group at Transport Canada during the introduction of the A330, the 777, the 787, the 737, and finally the A220, formerly known as the Bombardier C Series. Air Canada presently has 24 737 MAX aircraft, of which 22 of these are stored presently in Arizona, and 2 are presently in Windsor, Ontario, undergoing routine maintenance, and where we are installing dual heads-up display on all of our aircraft. This is a state-of-the-art safety system that enhances pilot situational awareness and is added safety system for all of Air Canada's aircraft, which include presently the 787 and the A220. We have another 12 737 MAX aircraft at the Boeing Renton factory in Washington that are ready for delivery and 14 aircraft that are currently on the factory floor being built. These aircraft were originally scheduled for delivery by July 1st of this year. As of July 1st this year, we should have had 50 airplanes in our fleet. Through the certification and introduction of the 737, I can assure you that the aircraft certification group at Transport Canada have been extremely thorough and professional. I would say the same is that's true for all the previous aircraft introductions that I've been involved in over the course of my career. They are experts in their field and respected throughout the world. The worldwide grounding of the 737 MAX fleet presented and continues to present an immediate operational and financial challenge. Our focus on this issue has always been the safety of our customers and our crew. Following the first accident, Canadian carriers, Transport Canada, and other agencies immediately came together and cooperated to ensure the safety of the industry and the traveling public in Canada. Transport Canada and the 3 operators of this aircraft have worked as a group to come up with a solution based on the information we had at the time. The sole purpose of this work was to ensure the safety of the Canadian public. This collaboration is still occurring today as we continue to work our way through the process. The 737 has been examined from wingtip to wingtip, nose to tail, by most of the regulators in the world and numerous agencies, including this committee. Once the process is complete, this aircraft will be, in my opinion, one of the safest aircraft in the world. It is important to remember that accidents like this do not occur for one reason. There are many factors involved. The manufacturer and the regulatory bodies are in the process of doing their part. Rest assured that the airlines in Canada are also doing their part. And I will ensure that our pilots are properly trained on all aspects of the 737 MAX, both new and old. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions in related to the aspects of the certification process.
Who's next? Mr. Wilson? Mr. Hudson. Mr. Wilson, you're up.
We'll leave the best for last. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, honorable members. Thank you for the invitation to appear before you today, proudly representing more than 14,000 WestJetters who, every day, commit to the safety and success of our airline in service of the traveling public. The grounding of the Boeing 737 MAX aircraft in Canada 364 days ago has raised important questions, and I commend the committee for having these hearings, for seeking information to support their questions, and for its support of our dynamic industry. My name is Scott Wilson. I currently serve as WestJet's Vice President of Flight Operations as well as the Transport Canada Operations Manager. In this role, our CEO and Accountable Executive Ed Sims and I are designates of the Minister of Transport, and together we have a shared duty of care for the safety of the traveling public and are directly responsible for the safety of our 700 daily flight departures. I'm also a current and active Boeing 737 NG and MAX pilot with 19 years experience on the Boeing 737 across 5 variants of the aircraft. My comments today will reflect the motion passed by the committee to better understand the certification process and the various relationships between the regulators. I'll speak briefly today on our observations and interactions as an air carrier through this process. On behalf of the WestJet family, let me start by sharing once again our sympathies and condolences to the families and loved ones of Lion Air 610 and Ethiopian 302. When tragedy strikes the aviation industry, we act like a family. We become closer, we support each other, and tackle the challenges together in common bond. On matters of safety for the traveling public, there are no competitive considerations. Our focus is always to learn from the accident to ensure we become an even safer industry moving forward. This commitment has helped ensure commercial aviation remains one of the safest forms of travel available today. To achieve this objective, we rely on and work closely with a host of regulators and officials. They include highly experienced Transport Canada National Operations Inspectors across the nation who interact with our airline at a technical oversight level on an almost daily basis to officials headquartered here in Ottawa. Last week you heard from Nicholas Robinson. The committee should know the tremendous work that has taken place under his leadership within the National Operations and National Aircraft Certification teams. WestJet has full confidence in Nick and his team, and their transparency and commitment over the past year has been commendable. WestJet took delivery of the first MAX in Canada on September 29, 2017. Speaking to the FAA certification and Transport Canada validation process, I can only pass on my observations, as the process is rightly independent from the operator, who can only operate the aircraft in Canada upon the successful completion of the validation process, culminating in the issuance of a Canadian type certification data sheet. It is my observation that Transport Canada took a thorough approach with their review and subsequent validation of the MAX. Of note, the FAA state certification was March 8, 2017, followed by the European RIASA validation on March 27, 2017, and the Transport Canada validation process was not complete until June 23, 2017. The Transport Canada TDCS with the MAX Incorporated tripled in size from the NG it was based upon, highlighting the thoroughness of Transport Canada's validation work and the depth of information added. Transport Canada went outside standard conventions when it also included head injury criteria safety requirements into the MAX validation in Canada. Shortly following the tragedy of Lion Air 310, Transport Canada and the 3 MAX operators represented here today took the unprecedented approach of transparency and commitment to safety by working together on a common made-in-Canada solution. This approach ensured we could align to a single standard of safety for the MAX fleets across Canada and capture the common attributes the operators share with a high level of expertise across our flight crews and the strength of our training programs. It also allowed us to work together to quickly ensure the best output to our crews, training for the newly acquired knowledge of the system, and the checklist enhancements. The unique approach across 3 airlines with the regulator served as a pivotal point, one that we have maintained now for close to 16 months as a strong collaborative safety model, and one that will serve us well to ensure a safe reintroduction of the MAX when it is approved to return to commercial service. If the airspace restriction grounding the MAX would lift today, our pilots would be ready and qualified to operate the aircraft pending the completion of any final training required by a regulator. When it comes to training and expertise, our pilots are highly qualified operators of the 737, having safely flown millions of flight hours throughout our operating history across 5 successive variants of the 737 aircraft for now 24 years. Since the MAX aircraft was grounded last year, our pilots have maintained currency on the 737 fleet, continuing to safely operate close to 400 daily 737 departures. During this time, our flight crews have also been actively engaged in our recurrent training programs that see our pilots return to the simulator no less than once every 6 months. Because our training evolves through continuous improvement, we have already incorporated many of the learnings of the past year's events into our recurrent simulator training. I'd like to note that WestJet recognizes that the heart of all safety decisions are people, our employees, and our guests. For our well-trained and highly capable cabin crew members and pilots, the aircraft is a place of work. We have asked the Minister to ensure that Labour is at the table and considered a partner as we go forward. This effort must be collaborative and inclusive, and we are committed to honouring that partnership. I want to thank the committee again for the invitation, and I'll be pleased to answer the questions with my colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Hudson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, honourable members of this standing committee. I firstly want to thank you for this invitation to seek information and to perhaps assist in answering your questions relating to aircraft certification in Canada from one of the 3 airlines with the 737 MAX in its fleet. My name is John Hudson. I'm the Acting Director of Flight Operations at Sunwing, in addition to a Transport Canada Chief Pilot, or a Check Pilot rather, at Sunwing, and I've been there in a standards and technical role since 2012. I'm proud to be a military veteran. I have been flying Boeing aircraft for just under 30 years, and I'm currently flying the 737NG, as I said, as a Transport Canada Check Pilot, an instructor pilot, and a captain. My employer, Sunwing Travel Group, is the largest tour operator in North America. The airline doubles in size to 40 aircraft in the winter season to service Canadian holiday travelers and shrinks to half that size in the summer, while we send pilots and aircraft to serve our European partners and keeping a smaller fleet within Canada in the summer. Sunwing is devastated at the loss of life from the 2 MAX accidents. Lion Air 610 on 29 October 2018, Ethiopian 302, 10 March 19, and we wish to express once again our deepest sympathies, as my colleagues have expressed here today. This is an unprecedented event in my aviation career and will never be forgotten by all of us in the Sunwing family. I want to make that point. We took deliveries of our 4 MAX aircraft from 25 May 2018 to 11 March 2019, and we had over 7,000 hours of flight time on the MAX aircraft when we stopped flying them. I conducted several of the customer demonstration flights in Seattle with Boeing pilots on the first of our MAX delivery aircraft, and I currently have about 80 hours flying on the MAX itself, the MAX 8, and have been conducting several post-grounding maintenance flights on our MAX fleet. Like all of our pilots and like those at WestJet, we are dual qualified on the MAX and the 737NG. In addition to my role at Sunwing, I am humbled and privileged to represent the 3 Canadian MAX operating aircraft, or airlines rather, for the IATA, the International Air Transport Association MAX Task Force, since 23 May of last year. That task force consists of international airline representatives from 11 airlines representing North America, South America, Europe, Singapore, and China. It's a truly international group. I've been asked today to bring my airline's perspective on the aircraft certification process. This perspective is strictly from an operational view and does not include the perspective from our engineering and maintenance groups, nor will it delve into the unprecedented economic strain that has been inflicted on each of our airlines. From the start of the entry into service project, Sunwing's interaction was with Boeing directly through a dedicated entry representative. The level of collaboration with Boeing directly was very high, but our initiative to liaise with the American airlines that were taking early MAX deliveries and our European partner, the TUI Group, greatly enhanced our training. Once again, it's in collaboration. Transport Canada National Operations was also with us every step of the way as we worked through our entry into service. For the entry into service pilot training, the MAX was a relatively easy conversion. Based on what we knew at the time and based on 12 years of operating the 737-800, the NG, there was little difference in procedures and pilot-level systems knowledge required. We were aware of the more complex differences confronting engineering in the systems. For instance, new engines, a digital environmental control system, fly-by-wire fly-by-wire spoilers. But from a pilot's perspective, flying the MAX in normal operations was truly like flying the NG. Following the Lion Air accident and resulting airworthiness directive that Minister Garneau referred to earlier, and as my colleagues have referred to, we established unprecedented collaboration under Transport Canada National Operations leadership and the 3 Canadian airlines operating the MAX. This collaboration was a result of that AD that pointed to MCAS activation during an erroneous angle of attack event. When those of us in the standards and fleet management groups looked at the AD, we saw that it revised a document called an aircraft flight manual, which is essentially a certification manual and not directly used by the flight crews. It did not address our own pilot manual, the flight crew operations manual, directly, and it left the airlines open to possible different interpretation between us for our respective operations. So that was the point of the collaboration. With our collaboration, we felt it was extremely important that we got the runway stabilizer procedure correct when we changed it and aligned as a group, and that there was to be no difference between the 3 airlines in how this non-normal event was to be conducted if necessary. What this unprecedented Canadian collaboration demonstrated was the absolute commitment to safety that the airlines and our regulator in Canada possesses. Early on, 8 November 2018, Transport Canada had approved our Made in Canada solution, and we were operating the MAX that day with the new checklist. We did and still do firmly believe that these actions significantly mitigated any residual risk surrounding MCAS and runway stabilizer events on the MAX. Post-MAX airspace closure, we have continued and expanded on this collaboration. However, there have been significant challenges in obtaining timelines and even agreeing on developments of the roadmap to return to service. These mainly surround conflicting information occasionally between the airlines and Boeing. We deal directly with Boeing on a weekly basis, and sometimes the airlines and Transport Canada, and between the MAX operating airlines ourselves. We have weekly technical calls with Boeing and periodic meetings with Transport Canada, sometimes with small conflicts of information that we have to collaborate and regroup and make sure we're aligned. I don't have a solution to this issue, but it makes it difficult for the airlines to react occasionally. Last fall and last week, Transport Canada National Aircraft Certification, National Operations, Standards, and the airlines held a WebEx meeting where Transport Canada National Aircraft Certification explained in very appropriate detail their past and current issues, in addition to several Canadian-only possible changes to both procedures and training when return to service is finally, when the return to service airworthiness directive is published. We now know approximately what to expect when return to service comes, although pending the outcome of a couple of meetings, the Joint Operation Evaluation Board and a couple of other events have to happen. And those of us who operate the NG will also have to react to several changes on that fleet as well as an outcome. This is now more than a MAX issue, rather a 737 issue in some respects, and WestJet and Sunwing will have to overcome that to make sure we're all aligned. In summary, while Sunwing cannot comment significantly on the initial certification process of the MAX, I hope I've given you a perspective on the absolute common thrust of safety first that all of Transport Canada and the 3 MAX airlines represented here, and how that has been demonstrated in a collaborative and coordinated manner thus far during our return to service efforts. I now look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson. Mr. Bachrach.
Mr. Chair, on a point of order, we spoke briefly and I indicated my desire to bring forward a motion related to the study that's currently underway, and I wonder if you'll welcome it at this time.
Go ahead.
Okay, I would like to move that the committee formally request that representatives from the Boeing company appear before the committee with regard to the ongoing study concerning the aircraft certification process. And I bring this forward because of the scathing report from the Congressional Committee on Transport that I referred to in my previous questioning, and because I believe that Boeing is a central party in the issues we are studying, and that the families and all Canadians deserve to hear directly from the Boeing company.
Thank you, Mr. Bachrach. And with that, do you have a date that you would like to see them by or on?
At the soonest possible opportunity. I'd look to the clerk to suggest a possible date.
In these cases, it's typically good to have a deadline. So if you want, like, by a certain date.
Okay, I would say, you know, we're living in some pretty unusual circumstances right now. So putting a precise date on it, I believe, may be challenging. Say within 2 months.
Within 2 months.
Thank you, Mr. Backrack. And Mr. Barcelo-Duval, you had some comments on that as well, I believe.
Well, if Mr. En français plutôt, si Monsieur.
Well, if Mr. Backrack hadn't brought forward this motion, I would have brought forward a very similar motion. So I completely support his motion, and I really hope that Boeing officials will understand that there's people flying on these aircraft across the world and that there are consequences not just in the U.S., but across the world. It would be a simple question of respect to appear before the committee.
Mr. Barcelo-Duval, Mr. Doherty.
Mr. Chair, I think perhaps if we can go to vote on this and then move to the motion that I have, it might help.
Or did you want to look at the possibility of amending the motion?
Well, you know what my motion is, and with all due respect, I actually agree with Mr. Backrack that I think that this is germane to this conversation and to the study that we attempt to have Boeing appear before.
Okay, so you don't want to amend it. You want to have a separate motion.
No, I'll have a separate motion.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Mr. Biddle.
Just a suggestion, perhaps we can just save this for the committee business portion, which we've extended, and hear from the witnesses, because I know there was a significant request from the opposition to extend the time, because desperately wanted to hear from these witnesses, and now we're eating into that time. So maybe we can table this for the time that we set aside to actually discuss committee business.
Thank you, Mr. Biddle. Any further comment, Mr. Backrack?
I will move that we table it until the beginning of committee business.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Backrack, and thank you, members. Mr. Doherty, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do want to, on record, that that I was in aviation for 22 years, both on the airline side. I was a proud WestJetter, sorry, Air Canada. And I worked. I had a company that also worked with other carriers as well, and I also was airport, and I also was Transport Canada. To me, I take safety and security, as you mentioned so aptly, Mr. Wilson and Mr. Strom, Mr. Hudson, that the safety and security is always paramount. If a mistake is made, that's a bad day, which is why I guess emotions are running high when we see some of the information that I've received. I'm not an expert on the certification. I will defer to Mr. Turnbull on that and and the minister on that. My question is for all three of the carriers. Given the information that was mentioned in the previous testimony, at any time was that information brought forward to your carriers about Transport Canada's concern with respect primarily to the stall identification that FAA was using on the 737 MAX?
Too many buttons. No, it wasn't. I wasn't in this position at that time, but I was never made aware of it. But in most certification and my experience working with the certification group, normally that would not be something that was brought forward to us.
Okay. Anybody else?
I just concur with that. So I was in the current position when the MAX was brought into WestJet. And again, we are independent from the certification process. So once the aircraft has a validation and we have an operating certificate, we're then able to basically move forward, but the information was not available to us.
Mr. Wilson, WestJet has a long history of 737 being its primary aircraft.
Yes.
Would it have been the expectations of the company that the stall identification criteria would have been the same applied on the 737 MAX than any other aircraft that they've had?
Complex question. When you take a look at the requirements of how a type is validated from the basis of the 800 NG to the max. The whole point of many of the items that they've talked about, including MCAS, was ensuring that they basically met the certification requirements.
Thank you. Are you familiar with the term nose down pitch not readily arrested?
I am.
This issue was brought forward from day one by Transport Canada technical experts, and the fact that Boeing was using that as their stall criteria. Would it raise a concern to you that Transport Canada technical experts raised this issue time and again with FAA, and FAA and Boeing refused to answer the stall criteria that was being applied on the 737 MAX?
Again, with the detail not fully and readily available to me on what you're actually probing into, sir, I can't effectively answer.
I'm going to read an excerpt. CPC FT03 is raised to gain understanding of FAA interpretation of 14 CFR 25201. That is Canada's stall identification compliance for the 737 MAX. The approach used by the FAA on the 737-8 MAX is different than what Transport Canada Civil Aviation has used on its domestic programs, and even what the FAA has used on other programs, such as the 787. This concern paper will not prevent Transport Canada's issuance of the TCC, as TCCA will use its 7379 validation to address this issue with the FAA. Does that raise any concerns with you?
So issue papers and concern papers are a normal process going back and forth, and we actually have been transparently included now with the process that we're going through as far as the certification of the MCAS software, the flight control software. So we do understand and we do see that concerns get raised, and we see how they basically have an evolution to get to a common understanding or ground. So without knowing what understanding was truly aligned with, particularly given respect to the individuals involved in the Transport Canada side, I couldn't comment beyond that.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Mr. Davidson.
Mr. Time, Chair? Okay, thanks, and thanks for appearing here today, and we all applaud your commitment to aviation safety in Canada. My question would be I'll call it the AOA, angle of attack, AOA disagree, was sold, it was installed in the 737 MAX, and it was pushed by Boeing salespeople as a safety option that airlines could pay for. And I believe WestJet had that option, the AOA indicator. It just seems hard to believe that Boeing was pushing a safety option on an AOA.
I believe you're talking about there. One is the angle of attack indicator.
Correct.
And one is the AOA alert, so the disagree alert.
Yeah.
So the disagree alert is common to the 737. Had it on the NG, was supposed to have it on the MAX. I believe the issue you're most particularly speaking to is the fact that the AOA disagree, yes, was an option.
That's right.
But it was an option on the NG as well. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, with that indication, there is no checklist for it. There's no training that is associated with it. So it's a bit of a red herring that itself is put forward as a safety option.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Ms. Jazik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for coming. And obviously, we want to acknowledge your dedication to safety on behalf of the public and your crew. Notwithstanding your expertise and what we heard a little bit from your opening statements on collaboration, unfortunately, 2 tragic events have occurred. I'd like to explore a little bit more about this collaboration between airline carriers and the manufacturer of the new or amended product. So could you just outline, Boeing gets an idea to improve a certain product. Presumably, this idea comes from pilots, from people who are using the plane. Then, is there some immediate discussion with airline carriers at that point as to how to go forward with this presumed improvement? To any of you?
Sure. I've been involved in many aircraft introductions, and it's been made very clear by Transport Canada certification that They're not certifying the aircraft for any individual carrier. They're certifying it for the people of Canada. So we generally don't get involved in the discussions on the certification side. They come to an agreement on the certification of the aircraft. Boeing produces the manuals. Transport Canada produces their supplement. And we use that information and determine how we're going to operate our aircraft.
Okay, so perhaps I misunderstood Captain Hudson, because it appeared from your testimony that you have been very involved from the beginning of these introducing new amendments.
Well, most of the involvement in the collaboration side of it has happened post entry into service. And as we've explained, the actual entry into service, the certification part of the Transport Canada role of validating or certifying aircraft is not typically something that we get a collaboration or involvement with. But in this extraordinary event that happened, as I was trying to explain, is we collaborated between the three airlines because we took it upon ourselves under the leadership of National Operations at Transport Canada to, first of all, we were all reacting in a combined call when the emergency directive came out, and those of us who are in a little bit more of a technical or subject matter experts, we just thought that at the time, and again, this is in a time compression time frame, that we could go further, and so that started us down this post of the Lion Air and emergency directive of making sure that when we changed an operation or we had an idea or things like that, we collaborate regularly with Transport Canada anyways on the operational side. So my thrust of my comments were post-entry into.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, because I find that very important. I was also incredibly impressed by the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure report of the U.S. Congress. And in that report, they actually mentioned that some foreign carriers asked Boeing about providing simulator training for their pilots transitioning to the 737 MAX. And apparently Boeing opposed such training. Were you aware of any of these that other carriers, presumably none of you, were involved in this request for simulator training? Were you aware of this?
Yes, I'll start off, and I'll let John and Scott finish. With Air Canada, we only fly the MAX aircraft, so we weren't involved in any discussions on the transition of NG pilots to MAX pilots, where both Sunwing and WestJet were, so I'll defer to them.
You go ahead first, Scott.
Sure. So the benefit coming off of a common type like the 737NG or the 800 in our case to the MAX 8 is the commonality of the training, the commonality of the systems, and you train out the differences. So I believe the point of your question was that Boeing was saying that certain training wasn't required. We weren't involved in any of those conversations. What happens is, as the aircraft is certified in Canada, we take a look at it. It does have certain training requirements with it, and then we basically, as a minimum, meet them and in often cases exceed them as we enter the aircraft into service. And it's important to make sure that the training is tailored to the background experience of the pilots, whether or not they're new onto a type or whether or not this is a transition with many years of experience.
Would you as carriers like to be involved earlier on in the process? In other words, before the state of design has certified? Or, I think we were fairly confident about what we heard about Transport Canada when Canada is the state of design. But obviously what we're reading here in relation to the congressional report about the FAA seems to really question whether Transport Canada should trust FAA. Is there any role for carriers earlier on in the process related to either certification or validation?
It's a great question, and I think that there always is there's communication that happens. Certainly in our case, before our first aircraft came, and we were quite collaborative with Boeing in that respect. But you have to know what your expertise is, and we are not test pilots per aircraft certification. We are operators, and there's a very different set of skill set there and a very different set of expertise. And so I think you have to be careful when you start to involve the operator too much in the initial certification of an aircraft. Certainly, Transport Canada has its own in its certification process, has test pilots, and they do certification work. But we have in commercial aviation, we have a very significant delineation between pre-certification and post-entry into service. And we are operators. And I said in my testimony in the beginning that I have conducted customer delivery flights and customer test flights, quote unquote. But that's post-production. So that's from an operator standpoint. And I would just caution that we want to keep the expertise in its lane. And we're good at operating the airplane, but I certainly wouldn't have an expertise in the certification in many respects of an aircraft.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson, and thank you, Mr. Ezek. Mr. Barcelona-Deville.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question I have for you three is, given what I've understood, all three of you are pilots. That's correct? Yes. Before your current positions, you were all pilots. Okay. And as pilots, and as former pilots, and through your work, you must often hold discussions with pilots, either those who are currently flying planes or who have retired and so on. Now, whether it was before the first accident or the second one, did you have any discussions? Did you hear anything from your colleagues regarding any specific problems or difficulties that these airplanes had? Did you get any comments about this or information about that?
I'll start. So, I mean, when we took a look at delivering the first aircraft in 2017 and then entry into service, we had a very easy entry into service. And for our experience in operating the aircraft up until a year ago, we had no technical issues, no training issues, and really no negative effects that we could see operating the MAX in service. Quite successful.
I would second that. We took our first delivery in the June of 2018, and so we had some experience before the tragic Lion Air crash, and we had no technical issues virtually on the airplane. There's always little snags here and there, but they were nothing that made the MAX stand out any different from the NG that we're currently flying.
We immediately after the Lion Air crash went back through our FDA program, which is the program that sends data from the aircraft to our computers, and we analyzed to see if we had any flight control difficulties at all on the aircraft. To try to better understand that, along with the pilot reports, we reviewed all the pilot reports, trying to figure out if we saw any trends, and there was nothing. And we did it again after the second crash, and again, we did not experience, with the airplane reporting to us or the pilots reporting to us, any issues that were anywhere at all similar to either one of what we saw on both of these crashes.
OK. Si vous aviez été...
If you had known about the problems, especially with the MCAS systems on that aircraft, do you think your respective airlines would have gone ahead and taken delivery of these aircraft?
If we thought there was any problems at all, absolutely not. We wouldn't have taken delivery of the aircraft if we knew there was an issue with the aircraft. All of three of us are responsible for the safety of the traveling public to the minister, and all three of us, irregardless of who is paying us, we take that job extremely serious. We will never put a pilot, a flight attendant, or a passenger on an aircraft that is not safe.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
I want to discuss when the airworthiness directive came out, the emergency airworthiness directive came out that the FAA had put out, and we had to react to that, and how they just in their airworthiness directive had gone through their process and highlighted. They basically, the AD highlighted this system and some of the possible risks with it. And that's where I go back to my original comments where there are times when you have to be decisive, and that's when the three of our carriers got together in that time, and we were talking about problems with MCAS, we saw that was possibly, at the time, given hindsight, possibly an issue. So that's in that...
Auriez-vous acheté l'avion si vous aviez su qu'il y avait...
Would you have purchased the airplane if you'd known that there was that problem?
Well, we would have let Transport Canada run through its certification process. So the question is better asked to Transport Canada certification if they had known about MCAS, what would have changed in their process. You understand what I'm saying? So we react because the whole system is based on...
Je comprends votre...
Okay.
Je comprends.
I understand. Yes, I understand your answer. All right, my next question. Now, information on the MCAS system was not in the manual that was provided by Boeing at the beginning. There was also no training for pilots on that system. The only training provided was a 1-hour training session on an iPad. Is that something that happens often, regularly, that is, information is omitted on new systems in aircraft in instruction manuals? And is it also commonplace to have a 1-hour iPad training session for new aircraft?
Maybe I'll just start with that one. When you take a look at the miss with having MCAS fully understood by the operator and properly promulgated through the publications, that's unusual. I've certainly never experienced it myself at this time. When you take a look at the training, it's important to understand that we train continually and we train through many levels of fidelity. We train face-to-face in ground school. We use the benefit of our electronic flight bags, which are our iPads, and the opportunity to train systems differently through that. So, a 1-hour system or a 2-hour system or a 3-hour system, that's not uncommon. And then, of course, we are all through our current training programs that follow an initial training program with many hours in the simulator. So we're very adept at ensuring we've got the right level of fidelity to ensure the right output, which is a safety output for all of our pilots through training. So 1 hour of an iPad on a system is not unusual. Most of us did much more than was required on a transition course, training out the MAX for differences than was the regulated requirement.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Thank you, Mr. Brosso-Duval. Mr. Bachrach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for appearing today. I'd like to start by asking about the workers who fly on the 737 MAX that work for your companies and every day went up in those airplanes. I'm wondering if you've heard from them, the pilots, I'm sure you have, but the flight attendants and the unions representing them. And if you have heard from them in a formal way, what has the message, what are the concerns that those workers have expressed to you so far?
Chomping at the bit.
Yeah. The good news is we've got relatively strong, consistent, again, collaborative answers amongst us. When we take a look at those that obviously have been flying on the MAX, both pilot and cabin crew, yes, they've got questions as well. And obviously it's our job to ensure that before the aircraft is safely put back to the fleet, that we're able to answer those. The union has been involved. Our head of the Airline Pilots Association in Canada is here with us today. And we've also been working with CUPE, which is our flight attendant unions across the airline. So we've been actively engaged with keeping them abreast. And even together right now, as was mentioned by the minister who was here, we're all put forward line pilots to be part of the Joint Operation Evaluation Board, which will validate the training from a line pilot perspective with Transport Canada's concordance and assistance.
And can you characterize the questions and concerns that have been brought forward by those groups?
For those that have flown Boeing aircraft in particular, and all three of us are Boeing captains in current Boeing aircraft, Boeing has a long-standing commitment to the pilot group, very engaged. So the Boeing aircraft, you know it at a different level. You're tied to it a lot more. It feels wrong that we didn't understand some of the information that was available to us. So most of it comes around that, which is how come this wasn't provided to us, because a pilot takes very seriously his responsibility to understand the aircraft, understand the system, so he's able to manage anything on the aircraft to a safe outcome.
Okay, thank you.
I could just add to that. On the lines of communication, I'm sure none of us thought that we'd become communications experts on MCAS. We're technical people and we operate airplanes. But one of the things our airline did very early on, and we found we got great feedback for it, was the facts matter. And we provided town halls and information, factual information to our employees, because if you don't have the buy-in of the employees to understand and ask questions, how can you ever go out and explain to the traveling public? And so that's certainly our efforts, what we've done. And we'll continue to do that before return to service.
Mr. Chair, one more. I'd like to just ask a brief question about the angle of attack disagree safety option, or disagree alert safety option. And you spoke to this before. I believe you characterized it as a red herring. I'm a layperson. It seems like this is a safety feature that was offered by the manufacturer as an option to the airlines that were purchasing the aircraft. Why did you choose not to purchase it? If that's my understanding from your previous comments. Why did you choose not to purchase that safety feature? And were there ever questions raised about why that safety feature was being offered in the first place? Because my understanding is that that safety feature alerted pilots to the problem that Boeing was aware of and had concealed.
I think you've mistaken two of the aspects. So the alert about the angle of attack is called the angle of attack disagree, and that's common to the NG, and it was basically available and was configured on all three of our fleets.
My apologies.
Yeah.
It's the disagree alert. Yes.
Yeah, so we had that.
You did purchase
Correct.
that piece. Okay.
Yeah, but I wanted to make sure it was understood. There is a secondary piece called the angle of attack indicator.
Right.
That's the one that is an option. It also comes with no training, and it comes with no corresponding checklist. So as a result, it's not considered to be a true safety enhancement, how the media has portrayed it.
Right. So if I may just very briefly, because I only have 30 seconds left. In this report from the Congressional Committee, they talk about the AOA disagree alert was delivered inoperable on many aircraft. Were any of those aircraft in your fleets?
So
Did you
that is-
receive
that is
inoperable?
Correct. So the aircraft was configured, and again, it was supposed to be lined up exactly like the NG aircraft with an AOA disagree, which is an alert on the bottom right-hand side of the CDS. The alert on the NG is a standalone. On the MAX, it happened to be tied to the angle of attack indicator. So if you didn't have the option, what you didn't know is that you wouldn't have had the disagree alert, and the operators weren't.
And just quickly, from a technical point of view, that is not the only alert in this particular malfunction you're talking about, an angle of attack indicator. There are other alerts that flight crew get, including an indicated airspeed disagree, an altitude disagree. There's multiple alerts going on at the same time. So the AOA disagree, while the alert is helpful, it's not the only piece of information we get during that kind of a non-normal situation.
The culture of concealment that's described in this report, did that affect your companies and your pilots? The features that were concealed, did that affect the airplanes you purchased and the pilots that fly for you?
Has it been raised by our pilots? Yes, it's been raised by our pilots, and this is why we've taken the extraordinary measures we've had for three of us to work together in the safety aspect to make sure we get this right with Transport Canada, with Boeing, with the technical experts to make sure we get this one right. And so it has been brought up.
Thank you, Mr. Strom. Thank you, Mr. Backrack. And to you, gentlemen, thank you for your participation here this evening or this afternoon. And thank you for the time that you've taken to come out and give testimony for the members as well as for the public and those in the gallery. I will now suspend for 5 minutes before we go into our business planning session. Thank you. 2 minutes is good for 2 minutes with me. If we can reconvene. Yeah, look at you, Luke. You're all by yourself. What's up with that? Our meeting passed the time of 5:30, based on a motion that was passed last meeting by Mr. Doherty, that we take on committee business at this time. Okay. Mr. Rogers? Yeah. Mr. Rogers, go ahead. You have your...
Yeah.
There's a motion on the floor, actually.
I know, but...
Yeah, but it was tabled for committee business, so what are we doing in?
Okay, hold on. Mr. Biddle, go ahead.
Can we, perhaps, sorry, I'll sit. Perhaps we can quickly deal with Mr. Baccarat's motion, and then perhaps we can entertain a motion to go in camera, which I think is a...
Okay, so let's Mr. Baccarat does have the floor. We're going to entertain his motion. And then I would like to, if I may, also go to the discussion on the motion, as well as, and we'll go from there. So, Mr. Baccarat, you get the floor.
Okay, well, there's a motion that I moved previously under my point of order, that the committee formally requests that representatives from the Boeing company appear before the committee with regard to the ongoing study concerning the aircraft certification process. I think it's clear to everyone at this table why that's important in light of what we've heard and what we've read. And copies have been circulated. And so I'm happy to proceed to hear from the other members. I understand that my colleague, Mr. Barcelou-Duval, has an amendment he'd like to make.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Baccarat. Mr. Barcelou-Duval.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I would like to table an amendment. It is that this meeting with the Boeing company representatives be televised. I want us to have a televised meeting so that it's broadcasted.
Thank you, Mr. Barcelou-Duval. As well, and I want to stress the point, because there is a process, Mr. Baccarat, that has to be followed here. If we're actually going to, it's a two-part process. I'll let the clerk comment on that with respect to the need of having a date attached to it. Madam Clerk?
Some people may be aware, but Boeing has been already invited in the context of this study. They have not responded to correspondence thus far. So in bringing this forward with a deadline, a specific date by which they should be invited, if they do not attend by that date, then there are other procedures we can follow after the fact. So,
Mr. Baccarat?
Perhaps it would be in order for me to add a date as a secondary amendment after
Absolutely.
we vote on the amendment that's currently on the floor, unless you'd
Thank
like
you.
an amendment to an amendment. But I know being a former mayor, you probably dislike those as much as I do.
I mention it now to give you some time to think about it.
I'm happy to make an amendment after we vote.
But I'll go to Mr. Baccarat's amendment first. Are there any questions? I'm sorry, Mr. Barcelou-Duval. Any questions or comments on the amendment? For it to be televised with no comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. Thank you, Mr. Barcelou-Duval. Mr. Baccarat, on your motion, would you like to attach a date to it as an amendment?
So I would move that we formally that we ask for them to appear at the meeting March 26th.
March 26th. Thank you, Mr. Baccarat. Any comments or questions on that amendment? Mr. Barcelou-Duval.
Mr. Chair, I heard rumors stating that the House schedule might be amended soon enough, so it could be difficult to meet on the 26th, potentially. I think I have another suggestion I could share with you. We could say before the end of April. Could that be logical?
Madam Clerk, would that suffice? That would suffice. End of April?
Yeah.
That's fine. Questions, comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Before we go into to Mr. Biddle's...
No, I have a...
I'm sorry, on the main motion. Go ahead, Mr. Biddle.
Juste une petite précision. J'aimerais que...
Just a quick detail. I want the French version to be revised, please, before it's published. Thank you.
Hold. Okay, back to the amended motion. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. We do have another motion, Mr. Doherty.
Mr. Chair, I'll keep it quick and in agreement with Mr. Bacharach that the committee extend its current study on the 737 MAX 8 2 additional meetings that shall be held subsequent to March 24th, 2020 to allow for the committee to hear additional witness testimony.
Thank you.
And I have this in both English and French.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Are there any questions or comments to that motion? All those in favor? Oh, yes, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I will note as well too, and Mr. Biddle and I have had some conversation offline that, and further to Mr. Barcelo de Ville's comment, if the House calendar is adjusted, that the committee also consider that.
Yeah, that's
Thank
fine.
you.
Questions or comments, Mr. Biddle?
Amendment that we up to 2 additional meetings, because I know there was one of the meetings wasn't necessarily filled or one of the slots wasn't necessarily filled already. So
Up to?
it just
You're fine with
just
that, Mr. Doherty?
If it's 2, it's fine.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. What we'll do is we'll endeavor to get, and I'm sure all colleagues are getting requests to I know we are, to appear before here. What we will do is we will endeavor to have, and perhaps, Mr. Chair, we can as a committee come up a date as to when we have, that we have to supply the clerks, the witnesses.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Okay, so as amended, let's vote on the amendment first. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. To the amended motion, and attached to that, Mr. Doherty, you're correct. If, in fact, we're going to add additional witnesses, we do have to come up with a date to, in fact, have those witnesses in
By the end of April.
By the end of April?
Oh, sorry, for the date for the end, the witnesses.
End of March?
That would depend if where the House is sitting. What we will endeavor to do from our side is to have a list of witnesses. I don't know. I don't have my calendar.
March 20th?
March 20th.
That's fine, Madam Clerk? Okay, March 20th, witnesses in by? That's good. I see all the staff nodding their heads, so that's a good thing. No questions further to the amended motion?
They're all a priority.
Yeah, the clerk has asked me if we can prioritize the witness lists.
Yeah, we will do our best.
Okay. Okay, with nothing further, all those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Mr. Biddle.
My concerns have been let out of the bag. I'm going into camera. I don't think is necessary at this
That's
point.
fine? Okay. Mr. Rogers.
Well, just back to a couple of previous resolutions that we tabled, and the one on the gas tax fund, for example, I think I'd like to put that to the floor today for the committee to vote on. We've had amendments there that were introduced by Mr. Doherty and a couple others, so I'd like to see that motion adopted.
Okay.
And the other one was I was going to make reference to Mr. Barcelo's motion on the controllers. I think it was 2 meetings he suggested, so I propose that we vote on these motions today, Mr. Chair.
Okay, if you want to distribute.
Do you need copies?
So
These were already previously distributed, but
right.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have I'm assuming, Mr. Rogers, what you're doing is you're tabling the motion for the gas tax. And are you tabling the one from the other one too, or are we going to go to Mr. Barcelo de Ville for that?
Mr. Barcelo de Ville might want to do that one, but I suggest we try to get these into the business so that we structure our business going forward.
For future business.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll take that motion.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, I'll take that motion right now, and then I'll go to Mr. Barcelo de Ville, and then I'm going to come over to you guys because Mr. Davison has 2 motions as well. So to this motion here, we all have a copy of it. It's been distributed prior to, and we also have it being distributed now. So with that moved, are there questions or comments to that motion? All those in favor?
Schedule it.
Yeah, I'm getting to, yeah. Okay. And to that, Mr. Rogers, when did you want to schedule this to begin?
Well, I haven't got a specific date, but I was thinking right after we finish the Max 8 study, which is, what date? The 24th?
Yeah, depending on the House.
So it's, but
It'd be next.
Okay, fine, that's good.
subsequent to the Max 8 study, when we conclude that, is where I'd like to
Okay.
see it.
Mr. Barcelona-Duval, did you have any comments?
Oui, en fait, moi, je
Yes, actually, I agree that we should be looking quickly at the gas tax fund. However, there's a very important issue that we adopted at a different meeting, that is the security involved in transferring from Montreal to Alberta, the controllers. So I'd like us to look at that before we go on to this study, because it's something that's ongoing right now and that will be irreversible after some time.
Yeah, no issue with that. I think we can certainly do the controller one first and then do the gas tax one.
Okay, so let's do your motion as it's written out here, and then we'll go to Mr. Barcelona-Duval because he's got I would only assume a motion as well, which is already on the table, and we can work out the timing to that. Then I want to go to Mr. Davidson. Okay, so are there any questions or comments on his motion? With none, Mr. Berthold.
On n'a pas de nombre de...
We don't have any number of meetings set, so depending on the witnesses we want to hear, we'll be able to set a start date and then we'll see afterwards. Is that? Yeah.
And I think initially we suggested maybe 4 to 6 meetings, but again, that would depend on the witness list and so on.
That's fine. Okay. Mr. Barcelona-Duval?
Oui, en fait,
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm trying to see what's happening. So we voted on Mr. Rogers' motion, so that's done? No, we said that we would work on this study. That's right. And now we're going to vote on when we're going to be looking at the study. Is that what's going on?
We do, because I know, and I'll be quite frank, I know what your desire is to get onto your study right away, and I think we all get that. I think Mr. Rogers is prepared to hold back a timing of this to then open it up for you, and then after that, do the gas tax. So let's vote on this motion first, that we're going to table it, because it hasn't been tabled yet, like your motion has. So let's vote on that first, and I'm going to come to you. And then I'm going to go back to Mr. Rogers again, and then to Mr. Davidson. Okay, so on your motion to put it on the table, all those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. That's done. Mr. Barcelona-Duval.
merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my proposal will be regarding that after we finish the study on the 737 MAX, that this committee move forward with a study on CN's decision to delocalize its control station from Montreal to Alberta.
Any questions or comments on that? All those in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. Now, witness list. When did you want to have the witness list in by? Mr. Biddle.
If I can, and given the circumstances, how about can that be something that be shelved until we get back? Because we'll still have our additional days. Plus, we have to write a report. There's still, I think, a lot of time before we have to set a time for witness list.
On this?
Yeah, but I think just pour aider, si des parties...
Just to help out, if parties already have a list of witnesses to send to the clerk, we can still go ahead and send them. That's right.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Rogers.
So I didn't have a specific date in mind for the gas tax study, just that we would follow the controller study, so we can, again, I guess the same process for that one.
Questions, comments?
Yeah.
All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Mr. Davidson.
I've had 2 motions, Mr. Chair, that pursuant to Standing Order 108, 2, the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure, and Communities study the Canadian aviation regulations pertaining to flight crew fatigue management. This has already been circulated. And second one, that pursuant to Standing Order 108, 2 again, Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure, and Community study train whistle at public crossings and procedures for stopping train whistling within communities.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. So let's deal with the first motion first. Any questions or comments on the first motion? That was the one.
Flight crew fatigue.
Major.
Questions, comments? Members? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Second motion. Questions or comments on the second one? Having to do with the train whistles.
Rural communities, things have changed and they'd like it looked at.
Okay. Any questions or comments on that? All those in favor? Opposed? That will be carried. Further business. Mr. Berthold.
Monsieur le Président, je voudrais...
Mr. Chair, I'd like to table the following motion that pursuant to 1082 that there be a complete list provided with all the regarding all the investments, the name, provinces, territories, amounts, funding associated, and all the related information, that the list to be provided to the committee by April 14, 2020. And that's to follow up on what Minister McKenna said and infrastructure officials from Infrastructure Canada as well.
Questions or comments? Mr. Biddle.
Again, given the realities of what's going on and if there's going to be any agreements and in terms of what the civil service and their access to it, if there's a willingness to, I don't know, even accept 30 days after the House next sits, for example, as because it's up in the air. I don't want us to be found in contempt.
What do you know, Chris? What do you know?
I don't know anything. I'm just hearing, and it's been mentioned by Monsieur Bastille Duval as well that if
of course the block. Of course the blocker. That's it.
It's the block liberal. It's the.
That's it.
But in terms of, in all seriousness, if we're hearing that in Ontario schools are being closed, sporting events are being cancelled, large gatherings, that it's not outside the realm of possibility that it happens to either the Federal Civil Service or the House of Commons in and of itself. And if we're setting a firm deadline in terms of these documents being provided, I don't want it to be a question of privilege to the member if we get back and that's not fulfilled.
Can we put a period after committee?
What?
Can we put a period after committee and take the date out?
Que les soit remise au comité le plus vite possible.
That they be provided to the committee as soon as possible.
Instead
as soon
of...
as possible? That's fine?
Sure.
Okay. Further questions or comments?
And if it's not soon enough, I will put another motion on the table.
we know you will, Mr. Berthold. We know you will. Mr. Doherty?
I think, again, to the comments, we're in unprecedented times right now. Yeah. I mean, we should say, too, that our colleagues' comments, that our thoughts go out to all those who are dealing with a potential COVID or coronavirus, including our Prime Minister and his wife. So I think that that's really important. In times like times of a crisis, that is the time that we put away our partisan swords, and it sends a greater message to Canadians that we're working together. And I think it would behoove this, whether it's the 737 study or the other motions that have been put forward, the studies, that we have an understanding around this table that given the possible potential of the calendar being adjusted, that we will do our very best as a committee to come up and recognize the importance of all those motions and the timelines that we have set forth.
Well stated, Mr. Doherty, and I would agree. Working with the clerk as well as our team here, we will roll with what we have to do to accommodate what the motions do intend on doing. and their intentions. As well, I appreciate your comments, Mr. Doherty, with respect to us as a House of 338 members, putting party politics aside and the partisanship aside. We're working together toward, and on behalf of all Canadians, to deal with this crisis and, of course, getting through it. So with that, I thank you all. I know we're going into a Constit week, and hopefully we can go back home and take care of things more local. Mr. Berthold?
Yeah. Okay, I just want the motion to be voted.
You thought we were
I want to be sure.
You thought we were going to walk away from that, eh?
You was to live, so.
You caught that. So with Mr. Bachrach.
A very brief piece of committee business after we vote on the motion.
Okay, sure. Thank you. No further comments or questions on Mr. Berthold's motion?
The amendment first, as soon as possible.
As soon as possible. We'll do the amendment first. Thank you, Mr. Berthold. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And the amended motion? Any questions or comments? All those in favor? That would be carried. Thank you, Mr. Bachrach.
Just that I heard from one party that they were frustrated by the inability to get the blues from our meetings soon after. And perhaps I didn't follow along as closely as I should have when we made the routine motions at the beginning around the blues. But I think it warrants a conversation about, whether we want to amend those or put forward another routine motion that would make those available in a more timely manner. The only other option is to listen to the audio, I believe, which takes a long time. You can't really do a word search on an audio file. So I don't know if I could put that forward just verbally as a motion. I would move that we make the blues available as soon as possible after our committee meetings to members of the public.
Any questions or comments on that? Members? The only concern that I have is the blues aren't always accurate.
Yes.
And once they get out to the public and they're not accurate, and you catch that,
right,
and you then amend it based on the inaccuracy, it's out in the public already.
Right.
And that's the only concern that I have.
I understand that, Mr. Chair. I believe the fact that we have the audio out there already, people have a way of obtaining what happened at the meeting, and that's a risk, but I think we need to balance that with our objective of transparency and providing the public with access to our proceedings. So
the audio will be accurate. Yeah. It's the blues that sometimes are inaccurate. Sometimes the written version.
Well, and what people think I said isn't necessarily what I meant.
I'll look at the committee, Mr. Biddle.
Yeah, I share concerns regarding the accuracy of it, because it's very easy to cut and paste and I have done it in terms of the transcript. Sometimes that's a lot easier to just post on social media, and then that becomes the truth that's out there. I don't know if this is a question for PROC and in terms of what decisions are being made across the House rather than just ourselves. And perhaps that's something that we can go back to, since there's only a few minutes left. Maybe this is something that we can go back to our whips and House leaders and discuss rather than making a decision right now. Because if the decision was right now, I'd be against it. But I'm happy to take it back to our House leadership.
Mr. Bachrach?
It's a fair comment. What was communicated to me by this party was that, in her opinion, the other committees make the blues more readily available than ours does. And so if that's indeed, perhaps the clerk could comment on that. If that's indeed the case, I don't see any reason why our committee should make information less accessible than other committees do.
Mm-hmm.
You guys love to make me speak. I prefer to be seen and not heard. But what I will say is it's completely a committee cultural thing. Some committees readily share them, some don't. It's entirely at your discretion what you choose to do. Some committees have special lists. I will do whatever the committee pleases for this.
And once again, my concern is, and audio will be very, very accurate. You can't manipulate it. You can't make a mistake on audio. It's you speaking. However, when the blues come out, it can be inaccurate, and I found sometimes, not many times, but sometimes a word and/or a sentence can be wrong. So you fix it, and then of course it gets repaired, it goes into the record. Again, my concern is that the written part of it, and people can still hear the audio, which is accurate, but the written part being sometimes inaccurate can then fall into the wrong hands. That's my concern. So
I don't want to belabor the point, Mr. Chair. I don't want to belabor the point, and perhaps members of the committee are of different minds on this. I just offer it as a motion, and I think we can vote on it, and if it passes, it passes, and if it's defeated, it's defeated. I'm happy either way.
I just echo Mr. Biddle's comment. I think this is something that we can take back to our individual parties and go from there. I would urge our new colleagues that are around the table to ensure that they're always checking the blues, because I have had media use my quotes from my speeches that are completely inaccurate. I suffer from mumble mouth, apparently, and not clear, but you should always be checking it. And I agree with Mr. Backer that the blues should be made readily, but we should have an opportunity, our office should have an opportunity to at least go through them and make sure that they're accurate. And that's my only concern. And I think that we should take this back. I know we should be, it's 6 o'clock, so I'll leave to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to just defer that to our whip?
I'm happy. Yeah,
instead of voting on it? That's fine, Mr. Backrack? Yep. Okay, Mr. Baldinelli?
Just a quick question. I was, as a newbie, how quickly do the audio transcripts get posted, and how quickly do we get copies of the Hansard transcript?
In committee?
In blues, yeah.
In committee?
Audio could be out right now. Immediate.
So audio is immediate.
Yeah.
The blues usually within 24 to 48 hours.
Okay.
And then the transcript is 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
And you do want to make sure that you go through.
Yeah.
Yes, because I have found inaccuracies in the past.
The blues, Chair.
Yeah. Members, any further business?
Thank you, guys.
With none, have a great week back in your ridings. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.